I'm going to talk to you guys today about fishing to an island with a method feeder, which is one of the most common ways of fishing, I suppose, on a lot of commercial fishery, especially when you've got an island to fish to. And an island can be obviously any distance, but particularly today, just going to concentrate on those closer ones, you know, like 16 to 30 metres, I would say, mostly. I'm at Lindholme Lakes today, great place, and typical on Bonsai Lake, of a lake where you've got a lot of islands out of pole reach. They're all sort of like 17 to 20-ish metres. And when you've got a feature like that, so often it's a natural place for fish to back off to. They back off around the islands, and I've seen a lot of anglers win a lot of matches here fishing method feeder to the island. This is the same on loads of different commercials. So what I want to run through today is basically my entire approach to that style of fishing, because there's lots of little things I think I can show you that will help you. So first of all, I think the most important thing is trying to choose where to fish. Now, I'm on a peg today where I've got an island like left and right. I've not got an island smack bang in front of me. This is probably a more difficult situation than if you had an island straight in front of you. Because obviously, if you're trying to cast alongside an island, the distance control isn't set completely by your clip, because obviously as the island goes along, there's different distances. Your left and right have to be really accurate as well. So the first thing you've got to do is have a really good plumb round and find what's there, what's in front of you, where's a nice place to the island to fish. And the rule generally is as tight to the island as you can possibly get. Like, look at your features, look at your overhanging trees, look at the roots in the water, and try and find a patch where you think, I can get really tight to that island, I can get really close. I believe when you've got a bit of a split island like this, trying to go alongside one of the islands is the best route for holding the fish. If I had an island clean in front of me, it would be about looking and finding a place on that island where the bank was a little bit barer, there was a few less reeds, it was more muddy, because it gives me a chance then to get as close to the island as possible without the fear that when my feeder's on the bottom, it's going to be laying in reeds or any sort of rubbish on the bottom that might stop me catching fish. So in general, the cleaner the bottom, the easier it is to fish. So all I'm going to do, I'm fishing an ICS system today. I'm literally just going to take this cap off the stem here, push the method feeder off, and I'm going to put on a 30-gram bomb. And I'm going to use that to plumb up. Don't be tempted to use a lighter bomb. If anything, go heavier. Don't even be scared to use a 45-gram bomb, because when your feeder's loaded up, it's going to be heavier than the 30-gram feeder I've got on today. So a little bit of stretch in your line, getting used to the cast. The heavier the bomb you use for that, the more likely you are to be ready to fish when the match starts. So I've just put that 30-gram bomb on the stem. Now, I'm just looking alongside the island, and my first cast, I obviously don't want to chuck it into the island. So I almost try to cast like 3/4 distance. And I know that sounds like really defensive, but I don't want to chuck it into the island. So I've chucked it there 3/4 distance. Right, I'm happy with that. Now I know this is about 1/2 metre, so if I add about 3 metres on, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then put my clip on, that's going to give me a chance. I'm 3 metres closer now than where I originally cast out. And when I cast out, I'm obviously going to be 3 metres closer to the island, but again, without the fear of casting it onto the island. There we go, you see. So now I'm almost about level with the island. I'm not far off at all there. I'm not looking at that thinking, okay, I know where I can fish. And I think if I was to fish to that muddy point straight in front of me, for example, I just probably want a little bit of turn off there. And now let's have a little cast. There's a little muddy point right in front of me, and that looks like a nice place to start and almost to show you what I'm trying to do here today. So let's just cast that out. There we go, like literally right up against that muddy point. Now, I pulled the rod back a little bit there, so I'm just gonna take a tiny bit off. And these are all the little things you need to do. You need to be tweaking all the time. So let's have another little cast. Because I've got a bomb, even if I did accidentally hit it onto the island, it wouldn't matter because I've just got a little bomb and it's only a little bit of mud. Right, so you can see the bomb going in there. I can get tighter than that. It's about 1/2 metre off. So if I take not quite 1/2 metre off, clip it back up, and I do all of this before the start of the match. And I always believe if I'm casting the bomb in, 1, I'm getting a little bit of practice on making sure I'm close enough, and 2, I can be sure that everything's perfect when the match starts. Now I've still got about another 20 centimetres to go there, so I'm just going to take 15 or so centimetres off. And I always like to start like, I'm going to say, a foot from the island as my sort of starting place, because I can always creep into it with my feeder once I get going, but I don't want to chuck my feeder into the island. So if you look there, that is literally a foot from the bank. I mean, that's as tight as I'm getting. And now, once I've got that with my bomb, I will have probably 5 or 6 casts just to get a little bit of feel, just to help me get a little bit ready for the start of the match. It's like a golfer practicing his swing before he starts. That's what you're trying to do, because you can't expect to chuck it out perfect every time. So I will just have a few chucks. Am I completely confident? Where do I need to bring my rod? All those sorts of things. But by picking that little clean piece of bank there, I can chuck that out and make sure I'm right. I can also just drag the bomb slowly, just to check there's no horrible roots or reeds or anything nasty in there, which there doesn't seem to be. Seems quite nice there, right against that point. Let's have another go. There you go. Just pull it along. So everything seems really nice. That is, you know, I've tried to do that nice and efficiently for you guys today, but for as many years as I can remember, I've always done that. And sometimes I've had 10, 12 casts just with a bomb, making sure it's clean, making sure that I'm really happy. So when I put my method feeder on, I know I can cast out and get fishing, okay? So I can then take that bomb off the stem, like that, and I can pop on my method feeder. Now, I've gone for a traditional method feeder today. When I'm fishing up against the island, I absolutely love a method style feeder. I'm going to be looking at ground bait and pellets today, and we'll touch on bait in a minute, but when you're up against an island, I always believe that effectively I want this almost pile of bait to just open up with a nice short hook length. Often there's going to be quite a lot of competition for fish, and I believe having your bait on a method is nice and open and just opens it up really quickly. I've tried banjo style feeders and pellet feeders, and they all have their day, and sometimes I'll flick one off and change and have a little go on a pellet feeder or a banjo feeder just to see. But if I was picking one, it would be the method feeder, which is why this has been so successful. I also believe in having a nice heavy feeder. So this is 30 grams. I could feel when I pulled that bomb, it sort of bounced down away from the bank quite quickly. So I don't want anything that's going to fall down the bank. I want this method feeder to go in tight to the bank and stay there. All right, that's something that I want to happen. I think it's worth at this point talking about my gear as well for this sort of thing. When you're casting short distances, you really need a short rod. The benefits of having a short rod casting sort of 15 to 25 meters with a method feeder, the accuracy benefits are huge. And this is a 9-foot Superior X. Lovely soft action, still strong enough for a double figure carp. But the short length means I can get really nice and tight to the island consistently. I can actually still perform a cast. If I had, say, an 11-foot rod, as I went to cast, the rod would be so powerful, it'd be a tiny little flick. So personally for me, I absolutely love that short rod setup. I've also got really strong mainline on my reel. Whenever I'm casting short method, I don't need a really light line. I don't need like a 5-pound line. I've got 0.26, which is 8 pounds sinking feeder mono. And that is so robust and durable. If I chuck it in the island, if I chuck it on a route, if I get a big carp try to pull me, everything is really tough and ready to go. On a good day, you could catch 50, 60 fish to an island on a method, and I don't want anything letting me down halfway. So having that strong line is really important. And I've paired that with my Centris SD 520. Some of you might like a 320 on a 9-foot rod. I think it's pretty clear. Personally, all my feeder fishing, I use 520 size reel. So that's my setup. It couldn't be any easier, to be honest. And then I've got a little ICS 360 bead here, and I can attach my hook length to. I love the 360 bead because I like the free movement on the hook length. So I like a nice little short hook length. I've got a 3-inch hook length. So if I just pop that hook length on, pull that nice and tight without stabbing myself in the finger, my hook's so sharp. And then I can just pull the metal from this 360 bead into the nice soft bead. And there you can see, when this is set up and ready, I've got a short hook length that can move really freely there. All right, and it means I can fold my hook bait back over onto the method feeder. And when it all breaks down, my hook bait stays nice and close to the method feeder no matter what happens. And when a fish sucks it up, it's got complete free movement to suck it up. Boff, hooks itself against the feeder, rod bends round, and of course the whole thing is completely free running because the bead sits loosely inside the bottom. The idea of these beads is when the fish sucks up, it hooks itself against the feeder, and then when it runs, the bead pops out. So you get all the benefits of free running, but you get the self-hooking nature of that bead. So for me, a fantastic setup. I've got an 18 KKM on today because I'm expecting small F1s with an odd bonus carp. That's my target species. And I've got a little tiny bait band on there, one of the small bait bands. And the reason I've got that on is because I'm going to be fishing with pellet or maggot style hook bait. So obviously you could take a standard pellet. Let's take a standard 4mm pellet just for an example. So 4mm pellet, a great method feeder bait. I love small baits on a method. So look, 4mm pellet sits in that band absolutely perfectly like that. Or a 6mm if I wanted it to. But of course, I love a single dead red maggot. So if I just give that maggot a little gentle squeeze, these are dead maggots, and grab the other side of the maggot with my nail, I can pull that maggot through the band. And there you go, look, I've got a brilliant banded dead maggot hook bait that a fish will suck in freely and hook itself. So I've got all the different bait options there that I want. I could put a little band and wafter on there if I want to. So really total flexibility there in the hook bait options that I've got. So once I'm plumbed up, I'm ready to go. I've got my rod, everything, my gear's perfectly ready. And I love this style of fishing because it's so simple. It's something I would always set up in a competition, of course, because I need it as an option. But even if you just fancy a few hours fishing, this is such an easy way of fishing. Go down, catch plenty of fish, practice your casting a little bit. Great way to get out on the bank, even just for a few hours. Let's take a look at my bait before I have a chuck in. So I'm just going to hook that up there. I brought 2 main baits for feed. First of all, some ground bait. Match method mix I've gone with here. I think literally this ground bait was created for this style of fishing. It's a brilliant ground bait for loads of different things as it happens, but this is what it was originally designed for. It's my favourite ground bait for a method. And importantly, I've not mixed it over wet. I've mixed it in a way that if I squeeze it hard, you can almost see it starting to open. And if I just press it with my thumb, look, it crumbles out. Because what I want, ideally, on this method feeder, is to chuck in and have my ground bait almost just melt off with my hook bait and the fish come in and attack it. If I want to wedge it on, I would just wet this up a little bit and I could actually wedge some ground bait on the method feeder itself. That's a great tactic if there's a lot of fish in your peg. If you're getting lots of indications, wedging your ground bait on a bit harder is a great tactic. But to get them there in the first place, I love my ground bait, almost like I say, melting off the method feeder. So I've mixed some of that up. Then I've just got some fishery pellets, dead easy to use. All I've done is got these this morning, soaked them up for 2 minutes, drained the water off, and an hour later they're perfect to use. I literally did it as soon as I pulled in this morning, grabbed the pellets and just did it. They're super easy to use. You want your method feeder pellets to be soft all the way through, but not like overly damp and crumbly. So by just giving them that 2 minute soak and doing it like that, it's really easy to do. All right, I would always suggest just doing a few of your pellets first, because some fishery pellets may be different to others. So at the moment at Lindholme, it's a really good batch of pellets. I've been here in the past where the pellets are a lot softer and crumblier and you have to almost soak them for like 30 seconds. So I always sort of take a look at the pellet, and I think if it's a good typical Scretton style pellet, then a 2 minute soak seems to be absolutely perfect. So I've got some ground bait. So basically on my side tray, I've got ground bait and micro pellets, and then I've got some dead maggots and some hard pellet hook baits there. Like I say, band and wafters are also great, but I must admit when I'm fishing and catching lots of fish regularly, I've found single red maggot or a pellet to be a fantastic hook bait as well. So they're just my baits to go to today, and we can have a little look at how we're going to start the session. So I'm about to kick off the session, and there's a few things that make this a little bit different to open water fishing in my opinion. So it's quite a cold day today actually for a spring day, but what I think is really important is when you're fishing to an island, it's setting the trap really regularly. So I think you want to be more proactive when you're casting. Often when I fish in open water, I tend to use a bigger feeder, set the trap and just be a little bit more patient. When I'm fishing to an island, I've got the small feeder on, I want to be having like regular chucks, usually about 3 minutes. And it can go quite quickly if you're not careful. So that's what I'm going to do to start the session off. I'm going to kick the session off with 3 minute casts. Now, I've done a little bit of fishing at Lindholme Lakes in recent times, and the pellets haven't seemed to be quite as good unless it's a little bit warmer. And because it's a bit colder, just going to start off with a little bit of ground bait. That ground bait that just melts off. Effectively, if I have like 6 or 7 casts in the first half an hour, let's say, it'll be a regular attraction of something really smelly, attracting the fishing, but literally just hits the water, and by the time it gets to the bottom, it's already breaking down and my bait's there. Which means if a fish or two come in, I'm not left with a lot of bait there. And that's what I want to start with, to be honest, because I want to be really cautious. So I've put a maggot in that band. I've half filled the method feeder with a bit of ground bait, and then I'm just going to half fill the other half. And I always like to slightly overload my method and just tap it down. And then when I squeeze it on, I count to 5, which may seem like a long time when you're squeezing a method, but then I don't squeeze it in my hand or anything afterwards. I've almost like just kept it and made sure everything's nice and compact in there and nice and even, so it'll come off the feeder quite quickly. So little gentle cast out there, that's bang on. Now the next thing is my rod rest positions. When you're fishing close to an island, what I find is, because it's generally very shallow, you want to be, your line will be quite tight to your reel. So I don't tend to bring my rod right round for a tight angle. I tend to cast out, and then I have my rod pretty much, I'm not going to call it straight in front of me because the line is going off at an angle. But you can see I've got the tip and butt rest. I use the same rest at the top and bottom. I've got my eye locked behind the rod at the front. So when I get a bite, the rod's going to tighten like really quickly that way as the fish swims left or right. And I'm on the rod straight away, and I'm on the fish, guiding it away from the island. I've found in the past, if I have my rod at a bigger angle, obviously the rod goes round, there's a lot of give there to allow fish to almost go into the island or go into snags. And I just have found it better, personally for me, and each to their own, but personally for me, I like to have that rod not pointing straight at the fish, but pretty straight. And because the water's shallow, it means I can cast, hit the feeder tight, accurately every time, and almost just drop the rod down. Because I've got that 8-pound line, after a few casts, it's a sinking feeder mono. I don't really need to do much to sink the line, and I almost just leave it. I allow the natural depth between me and the island to allow the line to just almost become relatively tight. And what that does is it means everything's tight to the feeder, but the line isn't pulling tight off the feeder through the peg. It's almost like coming away down the slope, if you like, but all still nice and tight, which means as a fish comes in, the line's not getting in the way of the feeder, and the fish can pick up my feeder and obviously bolt off, and it'll self-hook itself against the rod. Don't get me wrong, I'm not striking at any little bites today. The rod will either be like that on critical, or it'll shoot up and drop back slack as the fish swims towards me. They're the two types of bite I'm expecting. So 3-minute cast to start with. Little liner there straight away, that's a good sign. And I'll basically just go through the motions of doing that for the next half an hour and see what sort of response I get. See if it takes 2, 3, 4 casts, or maybe, hopefully, we'll be into a few fish straight away, and then we'll look at how we're going to adjust the feed to suit. But that's how I'm going to start off. I might tweak my clip a little bit. I actually just took a tiny bit off my clip just to get it even closer. I'm always trying to push it as close as I can to the island, almost until it's like, oh no, that's just going to hit the piece of mud, so I can come back. But as tight as I can get it to start with. Let's wind that in. He goes to wind that in literally there. As I've gone to wind that in, there's a flipping fish on. I actually saw the rod going just as my hand was going down. Perfect timing, and it's come off. There you go. I should have, obviously with a normal bite, I would have expected a better bite. But look, a bit of rubbish there on the hook. Probably just picked up there at the wrong moment. Bad timing, wasn't it? But good sign that there's a fish there. Going to drop that back in. I've already half loaded my method mould with ground bait. That was my first cast with any bait in there towards that island, so shows that you don't need to do any pre-baiting or anything like that. The fish will just come pretty quickly. Let's have another cast out where you guys are with me. There you go, perfect. Right against the island. Drop my rod, literally just dropping it down, look. And the line, I can see the line on the surface. Just gonna pop the rod down. That line's sinking really fast today with the bit of wind on the water. And look, I'm not even going to turn the handle, do anything. I'm just going to use the natural weight of that line again. Start my stopwatch this time. And hopefully we'll get a few pickups. So I've got a few things to work on if there is a few fish there. Do they want that maggot hook bait? Would they prefer a hard pellet? If they prefer a hard pellet, do they want a few pellets on the feeder? Do they want all pellets on the feeder? What about half and half? Maybe it's a case of getting the ground bait a bit damper and squeezing it on a bit harder if I start getting a few indications but no fish. I've got lots of things I can work on over the next hour, 2 hours to try and figure out how these fish want it. And that's one thing I've massively learnt with my feeder fishing is my bait selection. What I've got next to me here is so simple. Literally micros, ground bait, a few hard hook pellets and some maggots. But I've got so many different options to get the best out of the peg. I think unfortunately gone are the days of just squeezing micros around a method and chucking it in and getting dragged in. Certainly, unless the fish are really having it in summer. It's about sort of almost tweaking it all the time to try and find what's best. Look, a little liner there. So there is obviously odd fish there. Maybe not quite ready for it yet. Maybe I've got to tweak how I load that feeder, but I'm not going to make any snap judgments just yet. I'm certainly going to see out 6 or 7 casts, how I've said. That's dropped back. No, it's just knocked it down the shelf there. So obviously there's obviously an odd little fish there. Let's see if there's any rubbish on the hook. Look, there is. So there's obviously like a bit of grass and that there on the hook. That might be just preventing the fish from getting that hook bait in their mouth at the moment. These are the things that you get faced with when you're fishing to an island. You know, a lot of these fisheries, the islands are established, and because they've been there a long time and they're very grown up, obviously all the grass and twigs and debris builds up around the island. So even though I chucked my bomb there and didn't come back with any rubbish whatsoever, it still doesn't mean that there isn't a bit of rubbish on the hook, which generally speaking is why a maggot can be good. But it might be I've got to, I spoke about this before, maybe it'll be better to come I don't know, a foot away from the island, maybe just down a little bit. Might be a little bit less rubbish on the bottom. Fish might want it in slightly deeper water. They might just want it a bit cleaner. Something else I've got to work on over the next hour or so. I've been on a lot of matches, you know, where just coming sort of half a metre off the island, away from the debris, away from the sticks and that on the bottom is good. I mean, you know, that first fish that's come off with grass on the hook and then some grass on the hook that time with a drop back, are they just sucking in the bait and a bit of grass and that as well, and it's stopping the hook getting in their mouths? You know, these are all the things that I love about fishing, and I love to think about all the time, because there's some indications again. So it's going to be interesting, this, trying to figure this out, because there we go, it's gone round properly that time. You know, I've got to try and work out what's best over this next period. So I've that little soft rod. I could tell the fish are there, so it's only taken me 3 casts to get them there properly. They are there, you know, I can tell that they're there now. It's just how good's my hook hole going to be, you know, how confident are the fish going to feed. Obviously they're small F1s, so they've got little mouths. There we go, got him. Great little chunky F1 look. So they're the fish that I'm gonna fish for now. Hopefully a few carp and that muscle in on the action, which I think they will. Look, he's perfectly hooked, no grass on the hook that time. I'm gonna have a few more casts, build it up, see what I can learn for you. I'd love to tell you that everything's been going perfectly to plan, and this is one of many. But it's not, if I'm being honest. So I've had a nice run of fish, like 4 or 5 little F1s, and an odd better fish, but not many, like 6, 7 fish. And I just wasn't happy with what was happening. The bites weren't very clean. I felt like the fish aren't feeding that well, to be honest. You can almost tell by this sort of fish, look, quite lethargic. I think that's because the water's cold. Nice carp though. I think it's because the water's cold and the fish were just coming into the peg and pushing my gear around quite a bit. Nice fish, isn't he? But you'll see here, once I unhook him, oh, it's just, oh dear, the pellet's just come out there. Let me just check that. Thought for a minute he broke me off. So basically, what's been happening is I've not been happy at all with what I've got around my feeder. That light ground bait, I felt the fish were coming in and almost like they were being attracted by it, but there was no food there. They were pushing that bit of grass around that we got on the hook. And I was getting a few light bites and then picking up with nothing on and an odd one coming off and an odd little fish. And I thought, no, I need to make some changes here. So after like 6 chucks, started introducing a little bit of stodgier ground bait. That was okay. Again, I caught an odd and a little bit better. But then I've just finished, or I say finished, I've just changed in the last 3 or 4 chucks to combining pellets and ground bait. And I'm going to show you that now because it's been working really well. First of all, I've been putting a pellet in the band. I've got some like 4s, 6s in there, mixtures really. Some are slightly bigger 4s, smaller 4s, but I've got like a 4 in there. Found like a little hard pellet. Don't know why, it just seemed a little bit better than the maggot so far. So again, just a little change. And then I'm getting my mould and I'm putting like 30 or 40 micros in the top of my feeder. All right, instead of the ground bait. Now these are going to break down quickly. And then I've got some ground bait and I've mixed up and put a bit of extra water in there and a flick of pellets. And that ground bait, if I mould you a little ball, is much stickier. Look, it's much doughier. I can bind it quite tight. And what that means is when I put this in the top of the mould now and push that down, and sort my hook length out, load it up like this, I'm left with 30 or 40 micro pellets on the top, almost stuck down by the ground bait, and then a stodgy ground bait underneath. So this is going to hit the bottom. Those few micros are going to come off the top with my pellet. The fish can come and deliberately eat the micros that are around while my ground bait stays wedged on the feeder until I bring it up and wind it in. It's something I've done in the past that's been good, but it's not always the way to go. But I thought it's worth a try today because of what had been happening so far. So I'm still sticking by that point. I haven't moved yet. I mean, potentially you could move, you could go further along the island in search of fish, but I just wanted to try and figure out what was best on the spot I was fishing first. And then that means that if I do want to move to a different spot, maybe the other island, maybe further down the island, whatever that might be, then when I do that, I'm sort of more confident that I've found the best way of fishing. So when I make the move, I can be sure whether the fish are there or not. I'll be able to tell pretty quickly. I don't want to be sussing it out on a new spot. I almost want to be sussing it out on my current spot. Oh, just as I was tightening the line up there. So that was good. I don't know let's have a look what's happened here. That's all okay. There's a little bit of a stick on there, but that's quicker than I've been getting bites, much quicker. So I'm going to do that again. A few pellets in the mould first, not too many. Drop my pellet over the top, and that stodgier ground bait wedged in afterwards. These are all the little things you can do while method feeder fishing that can make a difference, because like I said, it was painful going, to be honest. It wasn't really happening. Probably just chuck that a little bit too hard then. Don't want to move the feeder. Sometimes I just cast that a little bit firmer than I wanted to. So just taking my time to sink the line. All these little things are what make the difference when you're method feeder fishing. They make the difference between putting more fish in your net. There you go. One of the benefits that was of keeping my rod nice and straight or straight-ish on the rests. I've still got a nice relaxed tip, even though I was almost hit my clip a little bit too hard then, and I was a little bit too tight, if you like, with the line, but I've still managed to get everything down. See, that's made a massive difference, that has. Without a doubt, those bites are coming quicker, cleaner, the fish are feeding on the bait. So it's interesting because, like I said, ground bait's been really good here recently. A lot of the anglers told me it's been good, I found it good. But without a doubt today, it's been so much better putting those pellets on top. This is sort of like my 6th or 7th in a row, I think, doing it, something like that. And I can tell the difference in how I was earlier. You know, these little fish, they're obviously coming in and feeding on that little pellet like that. Odd carp, odd F1s. It's brilliant method fishing. And for me, it's been a classic example of how, even though you're sort of casting to the island, getting all those fundamentals right, how tweaking what you've got around your feeder and how you feed it can make a huge difference to what you catch.